Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. Join us for conversations on the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture as we bring you tech innovators, thought leaders, and the movers and shakers who are transforming science fiction into your new health reality. So, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, I am so excited to have you with us on Hot for Your Health today. You know, our audience should know that we met, I've known of you for a very long time, but we physically met sitting next to each other having dinner at a conference in New York. And it was a little bit like fangirl because you know what I love? I love brilliant women. And you know, of all the things, you fall into that category. Plus, you're just beautiful for those of you people who see her. So you're the full package. But I wanted to talk about, I know, exactly. I want to talk about one of your specialties. You have a broad range of research you've done, but the thing you're really focusing on, which I have always said when I'm out in public talking about lifestyle changes as an academic, I was an academic for 20 years. Lots of things are important to me, but as I age, the most important thing to me is my brain. If I get to keep my brain, that will be my first priority. And that is your main field of interest. You know, we're going to talk about your newest book today, but you've had a TED Talk, you wrote Brain Food, you wrote the XX Brain, and now Menopause Brain. So the woman's brain, let's just focus it down. Sorry, 49% men, if you're listening, you need to know brains, but we're going to talk about the role of estrogen on the brain. And where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about estrogen receptors? I talk about that in the musculoskeletal system all the time. We have alpha, we have beta. They do have certain downstream functions. What about the brain?
You know, this is the first time that I ever opened a conversation with estrogen receptors. I love it. So estrogen is an extremely important hormone, and I think it's been mislabeled a sex hormone for far too long. The reason being, as you know, is that estrogen was discovered in the 1930s when scientists were looking at reproductive function. So immediately they found this hormone and linked it with fertility and menstruation, and then later on with menopause at the end of fertility and menstruation. And pretty much the conversation ended there for a very long time. It was only in 1992 the scientist at Rockefeller University, Dr. Bruce McEwen, and his team really showed conclusively that these hormones that we somehow pigeonholed with the function of the ovaries had super important effects in the brain. But it wasn't until 1996 that the scientific community really caught up, and the studies really started proliferating in the preclinical world. So it took even longer for clinical scientists and doctors to realize that estrogen in particular is crucial for brain functionality, for a wide range of brain functionalities, and also more broadly for brain health in women, the same way that testosterone plays such a big role in men's brain health. Now, the difference is, so two things that are important to note, I would say. Number one, women have been taking estrogen for decades before we've realized as a community, the scientific community and society, that estrogen was important for the brain, right? So nobody actually had a clue how estrogen fully worked. And women were put on hormones anyway, which as a woman, I find puzzling, to say the least. Right, because all these studies that were done back then just did not consider the brain as the target for hormonal action. And we can talk about that later. I know we're going to talk about HRT. But the other thing is that men had landed on the moon decades prior, which really speaks to the general disregard the science has shown for women's brain health, which to this day remains one of the most under-researched, underdiagnosed, undertreated, underfunded, and underserved fields of medicine. Yeah. So here's where we come in. We focus and specialize in women's brain health. I've been doing it for 20 years, and yeah.
And you're probably getting started, right?
In many ways, yes. Which is bizarre again. I use this word a lot. Bizarre. Puzzling.
How could this possibly be that it's it's on an organ and it's totally ignored? Where did people think all this function was coming from? Right? Where did it come from? Right?
What? And to your point, to what you were saying before, I think we're all catching up on the fact that health is wealth. Yeah. And I feel very strongly that brain health is the ultimate treasure. Because if you don't have your brain health, you just cannot enjoy your life. And it is just so important that we realize that we have some power over the health of our brain, right? It's really in our hands for a good part. And there are many things that we can all do to take care of our brains and really nourish them and support them throughout our entire life.
Well, and when you're talking and writing, you frame brain health as women's health, not brain health. Yeah. Brain health is the health of a woman. And I can share with you authentically that when I was in perimenopause and had not yet, I say that I've mastered midlife as I'm doing air quotes for those of you who can't see me, but I have done enough deep dive. It's just the way my brain works is I've got to know everything now because I'm going through it. But before that, and I started, people say brain fog a lot. We can define what that really is. But I was feeling I could no longer trust my brain, which had always been, for me, paramount, because I have the kind of brain where I'm a vision. I see things. You might be able to explain this scientifically. All I know as a surgeon, I can see in my brain what needs to happen, and I can make it. Or I can see it when I was taking exams. I could see on a page where the answer was. It's almost like I don't have an eidetic memory, but you know, with that kind of control of your brain, gone, my friend. And so the panic that I had, that I was losing my brain, and I started looking up all the preamble to Alzheimer's. Is this what's happening? I mean, this panic is real for women. And so when you frame brain health as women's health, I totally get that, because without our brain health, what do we have?
Yeah, and it's frightening that there is no framework for women's brain health in research or in medicine. Like, you either study gender or you study brain, but it's very unlikely that anyone would study both at the same time.
Well, and you have. So let's talk about, let's talk about, from your work, what's amazing about the woman's brain, or what's amazing about the role of estrogen in the brain? Because really men have estrogen too, but, you know, since not
the concentration. Yeah, the concentration is different, the functionality is different, the substrates are different. Actually, we're going back to the estrogen receptors, which I forgot to say about. Great start. So the way that estrogen works is like a key in a lock. So estrogen is the key, but the real star that we never talk about is the receptor or the lock. So estrogen is taken up. Obviously, it is flowing in the bloodstream, and the way it works is that it needs to bind to these very specific proteins or protein complexes that are called receptors, that are found a little bit throughout the entire body and brain, and are concentrated in very specific areas. So obviously the ovaries and other glands and organs that are part of the hormonal system, the endocrine system, but they're also really abundant in very specific parts of the human brain, especially female brain. So we have a huge amount of estrogen receptors, which is interesting because these receptors really are in large part genetically coded, right? They come in your DNA. It's your DNA that builds these receptors, which means that individuals who are born with ovaries and menstruate and have specific, in some ways, genetic materials, are born with brains that are wired to respond preferentially to estrogen and related hormones like progesterone. But really, preclinical studies have shown that estrogen is the mastermind behind a woman's brain, if you will. And it's so important that it's been labeled the master regulator of women's brains. Actually, my mentor, Dr. Roberta Diaz-Brinton, came up with this notion that estrogen is the orchestra conductor of women's brain health because it's so heavily involved in a number of different functionalities. And I think it's important to think of estrogen as an activator. So your brain is doing a lot of things, and estrogen just shows up and says, okay, work better, work harder, do it this way, I'll help you out, let me lift it for you. You know, it's like a fantastic CEO in some way. So estrogen helps the brain by boosting neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to remain flexible and plastic, really, over time, which is...
And change, right?
Yeah, you can change and adapt to different events and circumstances. You can bypass certain issues, or you can, like, if this route is blocked, you just go around it. So plasticity is what gives your brain resilience with aging, disease, and just for everyday life. And then estrogen is important because it's involved in the synthesis and the production of neurotransmitters, which are those chemicals that the brain needs to communicate information all around the brain. So all the neurons use neurotransmitters to pass information to each other and backwards. So it's really important that we have it, right? It's what really powers your ability to think and memorize and sleep and eat and move and just function overall. And then estrogen is also important for immunity, protects your brain. It's important for growth. It has it's a very nurturing effect and really health boosting effect on brain cells. We can see that during the menstrual cycle, that when estrogen is high, then the neurons kind of sprout more branches and more connections with other neurons. So the brain is overall more connected. And when estrogen withdraws and progesterone goes up, all these different connections kind of withdraw as well. And that has an impact.
Wow.
Feel moved and yeah.
What you're saying is maybe we should time our college exams, our exams of the growth, the connective.
Yes, did you ever notice that if you were taking a test or doing something difficult closer to ovulation, you would have more energy, you would feel more clear-headed, or just perform better? A lot of women feel that way. I sure do. I can't really time my talks around that.
We wish we could. Well, that's really fascinating. So when, in your analogy, estrogen is like the kitchen facilitator or the activator, telling the whole place how to do their jobs, but not just, I was about to ask you, so is estrogen's primary role to cause a transcription of neurotransmitters? But no, what you're saying is, yes, it causes, by filling a receptor on this location, it will cause a transcription of neurotransmitters, or in another location, it will cause the downstream of immunity. In another location, it will cause the growth of these neural connections. And so I know this can happen at different ages for a lot of women, but it gets really complicated in the mid-40s if women are still on estrogen birth control and their own estrogen is dropping and we're manipulating. And then all of a sudden, estrogen precipitously stops as the ovaries retire. So, I mean, other than, and, we could go down an entire rabbit hole about HT. I'm a big fan of HT. I'm on it myself, and it made a huge difference with my brain. I have to tell people, getting off of sugar, taking HT, and all the other lifestyle things that I just devoted myself to. But is that the only way? I know you've written a book on brain food. Is there a way that we should start preparing for the inevitability of the ovaries retiring to optimize our brain without natural estrogen? Because if estrogen is the facilitator, the activator, the everything, we just can't ignore what's happening.
I agree with you. And I think it's important to also clarify that when I say estrogen is the master regulator, estrogen is so important, I'm speaking about the estrogen that our body makes, right? So there's a difference between endogenous estrogen, which is what the body produces in response to your body's different needs and your menstrual cycle and your age. There's a whole system that is powered by estrogen, but is also important that the system is there for estrogen to function. So exogenous estrogen, which is something that we introduce from the outside, does not have the same effects necessarily.
I am so glad you clarified. So let's talk.
Yes, we have to, because I've noticed panic from a lot of women. Whenever I talk about estrogen, they're just assuming that I'm speaking about HD. And I'm like, no. I'm talking about the estrogen that your body makes.
Oh, I'm smooth. I am not.
No, you're not. No, you're not. Yeah, see, that's the thing. So what's important to know is that we're studying how hormone therapy actually works in the brain and the rest of the body. It's a work in process. We don't have all the answers, right? So we know that there are some protective effects of hormones or taking hormones, but there are women who don't tolerate the hormones, so don't want the hormones. And sometimes, hormones are not magic pills. They're silver bullets. They don't work for everything. So it's important to clarify what hormones can and cannot do for you. And that more research is needed. And then there's a whole number of things that we can do that do not involve taking hormones and will have a protective effect on brain health and also on hormonal health overall. So there are different forms of estrogen. We usually talk about estrogens, but estrogen comes in different forms. When we say estrogen is important for brain health and whatnot, usually we're talking about estradiol, which is the most abundant and most bioactive form of hormone until we go through menopause. Now, the notion that women's bodies don't make any more estrogen after menopause is not correct. We're still making hormones. We're not making estradiol as much. We're making more estrone, which is like the backup plan when it comes to estrogen, right? And estrone is not as powerful as estradiol, but it still works. It binds to the same receptors. It has very similar actions. And like estradiol, it can support it, and you can do different things to make sure that your body produces estrone, which is important. And then there are other things that support hormonal health before and after menopause, and many things that support brain health before and after menopause. It's really about consistency.
So it sounds like a very actually hopeful message and I'm so glad you clarified for me, because I clearly had it wrong, and I'm so glad. But it's a very hopeful message, actually, that no matter what your age is, you can still optimize brain health, even though your ovaries are retired. You're making estrogen, the backup plan, right? But what are I know there's probably a list this long of how to optimize the brain, but what are your top 3? Like, if you do nothing, people do these things, right?
Do these things. So I am preparing for peri. I'm not in menopause or perimenopause, and I have a regular cycle, full disclosure. But, I'm totally on it. And they've changed a number of things for me, even though I have a very healthy baseline to start with, because I've been doing Alzheimer's prevention for a really, really long time, most of my life, adult life. And my husband thinks I'm nuts. But I have changed a number of things. And for me, the non-hormonal options, and I'm hoping that I can navigate through menopause without hormones. I'm hoping. We'll see. I don't know if I have the brain fog or my mood is wonky, or I'll consider it for sure. But I am preparing to go natural if I can, right? So exercise. Really important. I know you're a big fan of exercising as well. And there are 3 types of exercise that seem to be really beneficial, especially that target different concerns. So the concern is like brain fog and lack of mental acuity, memory lapses, things that are more cognitive than cardio. And aerobic exercise is really good in that respect. I personally love cardio, so I do a lot more now. I enjoy it. So I can do it while I work. I have an elliptical machine, a short range elliptical. I have a bike, and sometimes I do meetings while I'm moving because I don't have any time. I have zero time in my life for me, so I need to kind of squeeze it in when I can. Strength training is also really important. You can talk about this definitely more than me, but just to say, it's also good for the brain, right? Because it supports muscle mass, it supports metabolic activity, and sugar regulation and metabolism overall is really important for the body and the brain both. And also bone density, of course, and the stronger your muscles are, the stronger your bones will be as well. So that's an insurance policy for later on in life. And then flexibility. There is more and more research showing that mind-body techniques and flexibility techniques like yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, those are really helpful for brain health as well if done consistently, because they have a stress reduction effect and the sort of anti-inflammatory effect. And they have shown, they've been shown in clinical trials to support blood flow to the brain as well, which is incredibly important to slow down brain aging and have also a hormone support functionality. So I try to mix them all up. I'm a big yoga and Pilates girl. Yes, 100%. I mean, if I could only do yoga all day, I would be the happiest person on the planet. Yeah.
But for you, is it the slow yoga flow, or is it the hot rapid? What works best for your brains? Is it yoga flow?
It's the Venus type yoga. I really enjoy it. And Pilates too. I think it's amazing for your core, for your overall posture.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah, I really enjoy that. So exercise needs to be done.
It's so much harder than it looks. Pilates.
It's harder. Oh, Pilates. Yeah, it can. Oh my God, it can be really hard. And I can. My mom, by the way, she's amazing. She does yoga at least twice a week. She does headstands, all these incredible things that she's been doing for so long. And my mom is a vegetarian also, very strict vegetarian, which brings me to something else I've been doing, which is diet. So I was raised a vegetarian.
Oh, okay.
Vegetarian, pescatarian. Mm-hmm. So for most of my adult life, I had effectively been a vegetarian / with the occasional fish. Yeah. But now that I'm preparing for menopause, I'm really trying to be more health conscious, even more than before. So I'm way more plant forward. Yeah. And I know that lean protein is really important. So I try to make sure that I have enough protein every day. And I'm a nutritionist as well. So I obsess with counting stuff and making sure that I meet my targets, and I do my blood draws to make sure that the nutrients are there, that they're being used, and all the enzymes. So yeah. But yes, my husband is sometimes desperate because he likes meat, and there's not. No, I'm kidding.
Your thing. Although I do love steak too. But you know what I like about what you just said is, you're really preparing. I talk all the time about creating a midlife master plan, which includes lots of these things. It also includes finances that people need to prepare that, right? For this time that's coming, and not just to let it drop onto your plate as the birthday candles burn down your kitchen, right? So
yeah,
but it adds a hopefulness, because if you can prepare for something, it gives you that agency, that modicum of control. And sometimes we think of what's happening to our brain in the future as something we can't control, but that's not what you're saying at all.
No, I think there's enough research now showing that your lifestyle and medical health overall are extremely strong predictors of brain health later on in life. So really, your health in midlife is the best predictor of your health for the rest of your life. Yes. So this is the time to really focus on you. And I know that it's very hard, like as a woman and a mom, and as a person who works at least 60 hours a week, I have a hard time to take care of me. But I was able to find very specific things that I can do regularly, that I enjoy doing, and I am able to squeeze into my life.
Right.
I believe have an impact. I mean, I can see now some choices that I make, I feel better immediately. And if there are days that I can't do certain things, I feel the difference. So that's how I know that that is good, at least for me. And, you know, they're common sense. There's nothing strange or extravagant. It's just about science-based notions that you can trust. So it's a good time investment, right? We don't have time. That's the bottom line. So you want to do things that you can do and that are proven or at least known to have a positive effect.
Right. And it doesn't have to be rocket science. The things that it doesn't, I think sometimes we overcomplicate lifestyle things.
Yeah.
And I don't really think it has to be, but even the way you explained the 3 types of exercise that are critical for the brain are, I mean, they're things we can all fit in. But I wanted to
plank. How do you feel about, I sometimes just plank for 10 minutes. If I really have no time, I plank.
Absolutely, because from a musculoskeletal standpoint, the core is like the oxygen of the body. It's the foundation of everything. If you don't have a core, I mean, people fall down from a standing position. They get off balance and that kind of thing. So I do planks, my friend. I don't like to do planks, but I do.
I hate it. It's so hard.
I just put the phone down with my little timer on and I click the seconds away. But, you know, we're not asking people as we're preparing our brains or as we're preparing our musculoskeletal system to do the impossible. It's just a small daily investment makes a tremendous difference.
Yes, I agree. There's, you know, when we talk about cognitive overload in a way, but like progression or layering up, I think that is really what makes the difference. Like, to know that there are all these different things, and in my books I have lists and lists and lists of things that have been shown or at least associated with better brain health. And then you choose the ones that you can realistically do and focus on what you can do. Like, I don't want anyone to feel like there's only one option. Because I'm talking about hormones tomorrow on Instagram, it doesn't mean that that's the only one thing you can do. And then you feel left out if you cannot take hormones. That's not the point. There's like so many, right? And studying all of them, and probably they work synergistically. So if you have a healthy diet and you exercise as much as you can, when you can, if you sleep as much as you can, if you can practice sleep hygiene and stress reduction, if you can get rid of plastic, or if you can invest in an air purifier in the house, you know, those are wonderful things that many people can do, and they add up, right? The sum is more than
the sum of them is, and to your point, we don't have to do all that whole list at one time. When I work with private clients, then I may come up with a list of in my mind, here are the 14 things I think we actually need to get to. But I had a client the other day where the biggest hurdle was actually stepping back after a long day of testing, and we had all these things we could correct, to clear the bandwidth for change, right? Mm-hmm. So that she could, I said, how much time every day are you willing to devote? How can we find this out, right? So, and that's when you start layering in the things that you're talking about. What could you do easily first? And then once you've accomplished that, so that you don't get stressed and overwhelmed, what can we do second? Because I think a lot of times we end up thinking we have to arrive at the end at go, right?
Yeah. Well, we're a very goal-oriented society, I think. So everybody starts with a plan. And then if you can't achieve the goals that you want to achieve really quickly, then you kind of give up. There's a lot of starting and stopping, at least in the United States. And I think what's more important, perhaps, is to have realistic goals that work for you, that you find doable and enjoyable, and that you can stick with for a long period of time. So one thing that we don't talk about enough is that it's much easier to change your body than your brain. The reason being, right, is that there is cellular regeneration in the body. So your blood is renewed at a specific rate of, days to weeks, and your cholesterol levels change in a measurable way. It takes about 3 months. Even your skeleton is renewed at a rate of 10% a year.
Right.
Your brain is not. Your brain is not. The vast majority of neurons in your head were born with you and will stay with you for life. There is very little cellular regeneration inside the brain, which means that you can't change it quickly. Because if you could change it quickly, we would be in so much trouble. We would lose all our memories, right? We would have no sense of direction. We would fall off the stairs. So our brain, the only thing that can actually change the brain, unless we're talking pharmaceuticals, that obviously, but with lifestyle, it really is a slow and steady wins the race kind of process, because you need to give the same signal to your neurons. You have to give them the same nutrients. You have to remove the inflammation, the oxidative stress consistently over time, which really speaks to consistency. Consistency, I think, is really key. Consistency is key for brain health.
And so when you say brain health in general, and I wish we really did have 3 hours and not just that length, but when you say brain health, all the things you've talked about so far, and we'll come back and we'll just only talk about this topic in the future, it applies to Alzheimer's, right?
Also brain health in general. I feel like a lot of Alzheimer's prevention recommendations are really aimed at supporting brain health across the board, because they improve mood, they reduce inflammation, they reduce oxidative stress, they support vasculature, they support neurogenesis, or at least neuronal repair. So that's the way that they protect against Alzheimer's disease later on in life. But they have a number of different, they target different areas of brain health to then give you an overall protection.
So these things, the lifestyle things we've talked about, and the things the food, the dietary things that we talked about, which is, like brain food that in your book you wrote, it's for everything having to do with the gray matter between the 5.5 inches between our ears, right? It affects all the things that can slow down our brain or cause brain disease, right? So it's double or triple or quadruple the effect, because it affects, right?
Yeah.
Well, I loved talking to you. I can't wait I've pre-ordered your book, Menopause Brain. I can't wait for it to arrive. I'm a hardcover person. I need to write on it. I need to take notes. So I can't wait. But Dr. Mosconi, I'm so thankful that you took the time today to be with us. And I look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. Thank you for having me.
I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. See you next week.